Welcome, everybody. This is Ty with the EQPOD podcast, and today I get the privilege of interviewing Dr. Giovana Catandi. Dr. Catandi, I just appreciate you taking the time. The listeners won't know this, but we've had to reschedule a couple of times due to, unforeseen circumstances, we'll call them. But I really appreciate your time, and I'm just going to take a step back and kind of let you introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Thank you so much, Ty, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation for participating in this podcast, EQPOD from Bottle Pharma. I think it's a very nice initiative that you guys have in like disseminating cool research studies in equine reproduction, and I'm very happy to be participating. Um, so I'm originally from Brazil, so you know my accent there. I hope everyone can understand me. So I grew up in Brazil, went to vet school down there, graduated from University of São Paulo in 2016. After that, I worked a little bit in the bovine dairy industry for a couple of years, doing some clinical work, but also research in South Dakota and Minnesota. After that, I went to pursue a research path in equine reproduction, which was honestly my passion during vet school. And for that, I went to Colorado State University and completed my PhD and also residency training there, guided mainly by Dr. Elaine Carnevale, and finished both my PhD and obtained a diplomate status of the College of Theogenologists last year. And then earlier this year in 2024, I joined as a faculty member the Oklahoma State University Vet.
Fantastic. So you've been around the U.S. For
Uh-huh.
those that are listening, you could probably pick up a little bit of a Minnesotan accent out of me, since we're talking about accents,
Uh-huh.
which you would not choose this face if you're watching on YouTube to match
Yeah.
with this accent. No, again, thank you for being on the podcast today. We're actually going to talk about one of the papers that you wrote called "The oocyte metabolic function, lipid composition, and developmental potential are altered by diet in older mares."
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that study? What prompted you to kind of go that direction?
Yeah, of course. So before I talk about this study, I want to go back to a study that we published before that one, where we were investigating what happens to the oocyte, especially in terms of oocyte metabolism of older mares. So Dr. Carnevale's line of research, one of her main lines of research was investigating what happens with advanced aging in mares and in terms of reproduction outcomes, in terms of fertility. And when I joined her team, our main goal was to study oocyte metabolic function and what happens with aging. So, what happens with oocytes from old mares. And the reason we wanted to study oocyte metabolism is because oocyte metabolism is actually crucial to sustain early embryonic development, not only in horses, but in many other mammalian species. And that is because the formation of new mitochondria in an early embryo only happens after the blastocyst is formed. So only after around like day 7, day 8, that's when like new mitochondria starts to form in the embryo. But before that, energy production in the embryo relies entirely on mitochondria that were already present in the oocyte. So the oocyte needs to have a good number of mitochondria, but also good functioning mitochondria to sustain that early embryonic development. So in our first study together, we collected oocytes from young and old mares. So young mares were all around 10 or younger years of age, and then older mares were all older than 20 years. And we collected oocytes from dominant pre-ovulatory follicles from those mares, so those follicles that grow and become ready for ovulation. So right before ovulation, we went and collected those oocytes through TVA or transvaginal ultrasound guided follicular aspiration. And then after collection, we denuded the oocytes from cumulus cells, which are cells, somatic cells that directly kind of surround the oocyte and they help nurture the oocyte during development, and used those denuded oocytes One, to assess metabolism through the use of microsensors. So we actually partner with the bioengineering department from Colorado State University to develop microsensors that were capable of measuring aerobic and anaerobic function from single oocytes. So like, as you can imagine, an oocyte is a very tiny single cell. So to assess metabolic function from that tiny cell, we needed this capability of microsensors. And our second use of those oocytes was to then perform ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection, to produce embryos in vitro, and if metabolism relates to quality, so to developmental competence of those oocytes. And what we found in that first aging study was that oocytes from old mares compared to young mares, they are less capable of producing energy, both aerobically, so via mitochondrial pathways, but also anaerobically. So overall, they produce less energy, and that was directly associated to a reduced capability of those oocytes in developing into embryos after ICSI. So we saw reduced metabolism, reduced oocyte quality, and we correlated those two things. So then in this publication that you mentioned, we wanted to test whether feeding old mares dietary additives that would kind of directly target this mitochondrial metabolic dysfunction cellularly, not only in the oocytes. Of course, when we're working with diet supplements, we are aiming the animal as a whole, so like the overall metabolic function of the system. And we wanted to see whether feeding those mares these supplements would be able to rescue metabolic function of the oocytes, and then finally rescue quality, so the ability of them to develop into embryos. For the study, we actually partnered with Platinum Performance, which is a company that produces dietary supplements for horses and has been in the industry for many years. And we utilized commercial formulas that they produce. And this publication, if you read through it, it's going to sound very confusing because it was very large. We conducted actually several different studies through different years. And what we did was to change the formulation of those supplements a little bit, like year after year, to finally come up with a formula that would be more targeted to correcting those metabolic dysfunctions and containing like fewer ingredients, one to be especially to be cheaper, right, for owners to purchase. So in that study, we looked at several different endpoints, not only in the oocyte, but also in the follicular environment, so where the environment where the oocyte develops, to then be able to come up with this story that feeding mares for a short period of time, in this case, anywhere from 8 to 14 weeks is when we collected our samples, was able to change many things in the follicle, in granulosa cells, cumulus cells, and in the oocyte. And our main endpoint in this whole studies was that we were able to produce more embryos from those old mares to rates that were actually comparable to what we saw for young mares in that first aging study. So we were very excited with these results. And I think it has contributed a lot to the industry as far as people paying more attention to nutrition and to supplements and to, like I said, improving the mare health as a whole to then improve oocyte quality.
Sure. So then how might your findings from that study influence practical dietary recommendations for horse breeders and veterinarians?
So I think that for sure we can go and recommend the supplements that we tested, but also we can recommend just like a healthier diet as a like in general, right? So supplement vitamins, minerals, all those things can already start to contribute positively to mare fertility. So I think after the publication of these findings, the veterinarian and owners started paying more attention to, hey, if I want to use this mare for reproduction, I do still want to, pay attention to her nutrition to really optimize fertility outcomes.
Sure. In my conversations throughout my day job, the podcast is not my day job. I don't get paid just to do the podcast. But when I bring up even the word supplement,
Hmm.
you could almost see a change in somebody's demeanor. Or if I'm on the phone, you can almost feel the temperature drop on the phone where
Hmm.
I get I don't supplement. I don't believe in supplementing. I don't think it works.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to somebody that has an 18-year-old maiden mare that
Hmm.
they have never bred before, as
Yeah.
well as other mares that just they've bred before with success or limited success, we'll call it. What would you say to somebody like?
Um, I would um, I would reference the studies that I did, and I would say that okay, I was also honestly very like skeptical on the supplements when we started, and it was just almost like I don't want to use the term unbelievable, but we were all kind of not believing our findings. But like I said, year after year, not repeating studies, but like changing formulas a little bit. The findings were all, always very good, as not only as far as oocyte quality and reproduction, but also like in many of the studies, we also collected some systemic samples. So we always collected muscle samples, sometimes platelet samples, and also assessed metabolic function of those other like systemic cell types. And we saw that those cells were also healthier in terms of cell metabolism. So we saw, especially like reduction of ROS production, reactive oxygen species. Um, and like I said, if we're improving healthy health as a whole of the animal, we will then improve fertility. And this is for sure not like it's not a method that will work for every single mare. For sure, different mares have different reproduction issues. But in terms of a mare where people try different diagnostic methods for to look for pathologies in different areas of the reproductive tract and did not come up with anything, I think trying to aim for improving the systemic health by giving her, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, amino acids. So the formula that we work with is composed of many, many ingredients. Unfortunately, that's a limitation of our study that um, we cannot pinpoint like exactly which ingredients were positive or not for cellular health and metabolism overall. But we know that this combination can be positive, like I said, not only for fertility, but systemic health in general. So I would say to those people that, hey, I'm also skeptical. I don't believe in all types of supplements, but I think that it's one thing to try, right? It's not something that is super costly or super or invasive by any means. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get some mares to eat the whole daily dose of supplement. Um, but I think it's for sure worth the shot.
Sure. And then as far as what they're consuming, right? I don't necessarily want to talk about the product, but let's talk about some of the ingredients that are in it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, omega 3s, is it, the L-arginine, L-carnitine, is it, CoQ10? Like what ingredients do you attribute to the success of this study?
So great question. I would love to be able to answer that question entirely, but unfortunately, we were only able to do so many studies. And the I would say the further we got was that we don't think it's the omega profiles because one of the last studies I conducted at CSU that I presented last year at AEP, we decided to supplement mares with either only omega-3 rich oils, in that case, flaxseed oil, versus omega-6 rich oils, in that case, corn oil. So we supplemented two different groups of old mares with either type of oil for anywhere from 8 to 14 weeks. and collected samples, again, systemic samples, oocytes, looked at metabolism, and we did not see any change at all as far as oocyte metabolism after feeding them just oils. We did see oxidative stress in granulosa cells, which are the cells that line the ovarian follicle, so likely resulting in more ROS inside the follicle where the oocyte is developing. We also saw more ROS production by muscle cells. So overall, it seemed like giving those mares oils was more negative than positive, is the conclusion we got. After seeing those results, we then added that combination of supplements that we utilized in our first studies. And we then finally got kind of the same results as those first studies, seeing improved oocyte metabolism and things like that. So for sure not the omegas. I really like L-carnitine as a supplement, especially for the equine oocyte. I believe L-carnitine is very important because lipid metabolism is one of the main sources of energy for equine oocytes, and they are very lipid dense. They're very rich in lipids compared to some other species. And L-carnitine is actually very, very important for the successful fatty acid metabolism route inside mitochondria, and also for pyruvate metabolism. So I really like L-carnitine. We did a study in obese mares supplementing just L-carnitine, and we were able to see some positive results on systemic metabolism. That particular study, we didn't look at oocytes. L-arginine, I'm not sure if that was part of our formula. I don't think it was, but I think that would also be beneficial for improving metabolism, but especially blood circulation. What antioxidants? We did include CoQ10 in one of our formulas, but then we actually removed it in follow-up studies. So we don't think that specific antioxidant may be crucial. But we used, in the combination formula, there are other antioxidants such as vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, other things. So I don't know how to answer that.
It makes sense that you're limited because if you have too many variables, then what study are you actually doing? I talked to Dr. Carly Fedorka, and funding for studies is a big deal. So
Yes.
we would love to help you out in any way we can, and I think that would be a really great follow-up study too. Is just figuring out what ingredient is actually helping these metabolic.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
when we're talking about metabolic pathways and oocytes, how is it actually getting to the oocyte, right? So you're taking the supplement, but as a skeptic, you're telling me that it's getting to the oocyte. How does it?
So, like, if you think about it, like nutrition and systemic health, everything is kind of related, right? So everything we eat can somehow reach all our cell types, including our oocytes. So in our case, we measured different things in oocytes, but also in follicular fluid. So when we talk about oocytes, we have to think where are they in our body, right? They are inside the ovary, inside a follicle. So the female ovary has several different follicles where different oocytes develop, and they develop in this kind of tiny environment, microenvironment, that is created by granulosa cells, which they line the ovarian follicle. Inside that follicle, we then have follicular fluid, which we also assayed. And inside that follicular fluid, attached to those granulosa cells, we have our cumulus cells, which are honestly kind of the same thing as granulosa cells, but they are a little more specialized, and they directly surround that oocyte. So we actually assessed all those layers, so granulosa cells, follicular fluid, cumulus cells, and oocytes. And it would be very difficult to then measure like how each ingredient is getting to those cell types. But we did through our different studies, we did assay, for example, how adding these dietary supplements to mares would affect would change follicular fluid composition. So, for example, like I said, one of the ingredients was L-carnitine, and we collected samples before supplementing a group of mares and then after those 8 to whatever 12 weeks, and compare pre and post, like paired samples from the same mare, in terms of L-carnitine concentration, fatty acids, triglycerides, and other things. And we did see that, for example, L-carnitine does reach and accumulate in the follicular environment. So it increases not only systemically, but also in that follicular environment. We also assessed the oocytes, not only through those microsensors that I said, but also we assessed them by liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. So that being a type of analysis that pretty much like breaks the whole cell and can quantify several different metabolites, specifically in quantities. And we saw that after feeding mares, we did reduce many types of lipid concentrations in those oocytes. And we believe that that's kind of related to improved metabolism because, like I said, lipids are a main substrate for oocyte energy production. So if they're producing more energy, they're likely using more of those lipid reserves. So it's hard to like say for sure, oh, everything's getting to the oocyte, but because of all these changes that we see, I do believe that at least the good things are getting to the oocyte and are, stimulating
Sure.
metabolism, stimulating good quality, and the ability of them to then form embryos after fertilization.
Right. So in your study, you'd mentioned it was a short term.
Mhm.
That they were using this 8 weeks to 14 weeks. Would the prolonged use of it be better, or don't we really know because you're between that 8 to 14 weeks?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be better, but I would say that that's kind of the minimum window of time that we recommend. Like, if you want to see the positive effects of supplements, you cannot start like today to see them tomorrow, right? That's kind of not going to happen. So it's kind of a prolonged effect, not like very long term. But for us to be able to see some of those changes, we need those mares to be eating those good things for, we say at least 6 weeks, but ideally at least 8 weeks. And that we can actually then attribute to oocyte follicular development, because when mares ovulate, that oocyte and that follicle, they have started to develop, months ago, like at least a couple months ago, not a week ago, not a few days ago. So if we want those oocytes to develop healthier, we believe that the supplements and the good ingredients, they need to be exposed to those for, that entire development window.
Sure. So you did the study on, or the first study, I should say, on younger mares, 10 years or younger, and then
Hmm.
older mares, 20 years
Yeah.
or older. What about the ones right in between, right? Like,
Yeah.
what would you recommend for the ones that, and I'm in this
Uh-huh.
camp, I feel young, but the young
Hmm.
kids say I'm old, but the old people say that I'm young. So, like,
Yeah.
what that happy medium of I'm not a young mare, but I'm also not an
Hmm.
older mare. What would you recommend for supplementation of those mares to help
Yeah.
with oocyte development?
Um, Great question. I would honestly recommend, uh, if not the same, very similar formulations, mainly because I do believe in the overall health of the mare to be able to then help fertility. I think the mare overall has to be in a balance for then fertility outcomes to improve. Um, and not only, L-carnitine, antioxidants, and the things that are improving cell metabolism are beneficial for reproduction, but also prebiotics, overall vitamins, overall like having, we say like a healthy diet, right? And that was also kind of the base of this whole formulation that we use, was to simulate, like in humans, what they call the Mediterranean diet, which is, more rich in omega-3s, more rich in vegetables, vitamins, minerals. So I think it's not only for the old mare, but also for even the young mare. the middle age for sure, because with there are some very good graphs of large studies from like the 90s, where you see the effects of aging on fertility of mares. They don't appear suddenly when they reach 20s, right? They are kind of gradual. So as they get older, you start to see. So even mares that are in their mid-teens, you already start to see that decrease in fertility rates. Um, so yeah, I think I would recommend very similar combinations, and I do think that we have to kind of avoid wanting to supplement just one ingredient, because it's like I don't believe that we would see such great positive results if we're feeding just one thing, only because that's just one thing, right? Nutrition and overall health involves so many things that I think we have to really think about nurturing that mare and that system as a whole. So I believe in more of a combination of dietary additives.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing up the overall nutrition, and it's not just like, hey, if your horse has a crappy diet, it's not getting good hay, it's not
Hmm.
good at getting what it needs. Supplementing isn't going to help,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
you
Yeah,
have to have good nutrition as a base,
yeah.
and then adding
Hmm.
on the supplement. Your supplementation cannot be the main thing affecting
Yeah,
health.
yeah. It's not going to correct everything, right?
Yeah. So in a perfect world, Dr. Catandi, what is the
Hmm.
next study that you want to do? You've got endless funding, you've got all the help in the world. What is the
Uh-huh.
next study that you would want to do?
Wow. That's like I have like one study that if I had all the time, all the money, that's what I would do. I would like to see how, because like I said, we improve oocyte quality, we improve, fertility outcomes. So okay, we have more foals, but can we improve like performance of those foals? So in horse, it's very hard to do generational studies just because the generational interval is so long, right? Gestation itself is already like 340, 11 months, 340 days, 11 months. And then for that foal to then start competing, it's at least a couple years more. So I would like to see if improving oocyte metabolism, we improve baby metabolism, we improve performance, we improve muscle metabolism of that baby, overall performance, and especially if we improve fertility outcomes from that baby and their baby, and like
Sure.
transgenerational effects. Because in humans, um, for human research, they utilize a lot the mouse model because it's a cheaper model, it's a more convenient model, but also because the transgenerational intervals are so small. So you can actually do those studies in mice. And they see that if you correct metabolism of oocytes in mice, you actually correct, you prevent development of metabolic diseases, you prevent things such as, what's the word? Premature aging, things like that. So I would love to do that in horses. I think I'll never do that, but that would be like my dream study.
Sure. Maybe somebody, a donor or somebody could step up and pay you to do that while you're at Oklahoma State
Hmm.
University.
Yeah, right. Hey, please call me.
Well, no,
But
I
I
go ahead.
sorry. Now I was gonna mention that what I like is that now we're seeing kind of more studies coming out with diet supplements, and I like that because I like to think that what I did matters and is kind of inspiring more researchers out there, and also to see different formulas also being positive. So I there was a Brazilian meeting of veterinarians last week, and they presented a study with supplements actually from Botu Pharma, saying that it was actually also positive for fertility outcomes of mares, not necessarily old mares. So again, we go back to that question of, oh, is it only the old mare that needs supplements? That study, I think they were like mid-teens to mid-20s, and they saw very good, like positive outcomes there too. So, and that is again a formula that has several different ingredients, but it was positive. So it's, I love to see. more studies like that coming out.
Sure. Yeah. We hope to be a resource to share those studies and also bring on
Hmm.
those researchers to talk about it, just like you're doing with your research. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Any final thoughts on this study or any other studies that you've read that you can tie up this conversation with?
Um, I do want to just also mention that the studies that we did, we focused mainly on aging, but afterwards we also did some studies with mare obesity because that's a pretty common issue as well in our industry. That especially brood mares, they're sometimes fat to become quite chubby, and I know they look good, they look healthy, but they're not healthy. No one should be chubby, unfortunately. Um, and we supplemented diet of obese mares, and we actually saw some pretty incredible results as well, not only in terms of oocyte metabolism but also systemic overall metabolism, even improving things like insulin dysregulation of those obese mares. So again, nutrition targeted diet supplementation is important not only for old mares but probably for many problem mares, metabolic mares, obese mares, and even your healthy mare. Like, I don't think it would hurt to supplement good things even for healthy mares. um, and I do hope that more research comes out with dietary supplements. There's a lot still to be investigated with horses, these transgenerational effects, also stallions. There's a lot out there in terms of dietary supplements for stallions. Um, and that's actually where all of this nutritional thing for reproduction started. I think there's still so much to be investigated.
Sure. No, I appreciate your time, and this conversation has been awesome. Hopefully, we can get you back on to talk about a new study or just
Yeah.
any other issues, reproduction issues. If you wanted to talk to, you're always welcome to come back on. But again, thank you so much for allowing us the time to have this conversation with you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Ty. I appreciate the time, your time as well, and the invitation. Really appreciate the opportunity of being here.
Awesome. And is there anywhere that our listeners, if they wanted to fund $1 million to your next research, how do they get a hold of you?
They can shoot me an email to start with. I think that would be the easiest thing. And my email address is Giovana, my first name, dot Catandi, my last name, at OK State from Oklahoma State, dot E.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks, Ty.